Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Today's lesson is all about one of the models and approaches in working with individuals and families, the psychosocial approach. Psychosocial approach is considered to be a systems theory approach to social work practice because it covers major aspects of an individual. This approach believes that a person is a system with subsystems that are interrelated and interconnected with each other. This approach tries to address problems in psychosocial functioning. It means that if a person is socially dysfunctional or psychosocially dysfunctional, it may affect the individual's everyday life. Hence, this approach will be used in order to improve the person's way of adjusting to his problems or how he copes with his problems. In this approach, the human being is viewed as a personality system. The use of psychosocial approach starts during the initial phase, followed by the assessment of the client in his situation, and goes through the treatment. During the initial phase, it is important for both the social worker and the client to understand the reasons for the contact. The client must clearly define his problem, his reason why he comes to the agency, the drive that forces him or her to come for help. After the client achieves the eligibility status to be helped in that agency, the client-worker relationship must be established. It is important to emphasize to the client the limitation or the boundaries of the relationship between the social worker and the client. It is also important for the social worker to emphasize to the client that he or she needs to participate in the duration of the treatment because first and foremost, it is the client who knows his problem. He knows what needs to be done in order for him or her to solve his problem. And in order to do that, the social worker must emphasize that the client must be motivated to be helped by the agency with his utmost participation, hence the principle of self-determination. It is important to note that in the psychosocial approach, the treatment actually begins during the first interview. The way the social worker listens to the client, the way he responds to the client, or let's just say, just the moment the social worker smiles at the client will feel at ease and will establish trust to the social worker. In doing so, the client will be able to share more information to the social worker because of the trust that is being built. Basically, the initial phase starts with gathering the information needed in order to conduct the treatment or the assessment. During the assessment, three types of diagnosis can be used in this approach: dynamic, etiological, and classificatory. Dynamic in the sense that the social worker must examine the client's different personalities as he relates to his environment, how he interacts to the society, and how he deals with his different problems. It is etiological because the social worker can identify or can study the causes of the difficulty of the client in order to understand the problem that he is encountering, which is the reason why he comes for help. It is classificatory because it is also important for the social worker to identify who your client is based on the different aspect of his life. For example, his ethnic background, his family life situation, the religion where he comes from, the culture that he practices or the traditions that he practices, the beliefs that he follows, and other aspects of his personal life. Since in this approach, we both study and examine the psychological aspect and the social aspect of our client or the individual, the clinical diagnosis is being used as a term to refer to classifying based on personality disturbance. It is also important that in this approach, we make use of our techniques, skills, and knowledge in any psychological related assessment, since we do not only deal on the specific immediate problem of our client. After gathering enough information and carefully assess the situation of the client, goals and treatment planning follows. Always remember that in formulating goals and planning the treatment or the intervention, we always need to focus on SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bounded. Take note that it is a guide in formulating goals and objectives, as well as the appropriate activities needed. And please also do remember that in this part of the helping process, the participation of both the client and social worker is very important. The ultimate objective of social work in the psychosocial approach is to alleviate the client's distress and decrease the malfunctioning in the person's situation system. That is why the techniques of social worker is very important, because it is not only the problem of the client that we are trying to solve, but to touch the personality system of the client or the individual. That means we also need to study and assess the client's environment, his family, his neighbors, other group where he or she belongs, organizations, or other institutions where he is connected with. There are two forms of treatment in psychosocial approach. We have indirect treatment and direct treatment. The difference between the two is basically in indirect treatment, the workers intervene directly in the environment of the client. He focuses in the environment of the client. That means what specific influences in the community or in the society where the client lives, the person, groups, or institutions that he is connected with or mingling with. On the other hand, direct treatment involves direct work with the client himself. In this sense, the social worker communicates directly to the client, assesses the client, and personal connection between the social worker and the client is being observed, as according to Hollis, the influence of mind upon mind. Please do remember that in psychosocial approach, what we are trying to influence is the psychosocial aspect of the client's life. And there are 6 procedures of intervention in this approach. First, we have sustaining. It involves supportive remarks given by the social worker to the client. For example, by making sure that what they feel or what he feels is valid and true based on his own personality. That is already a form of sustaining, instead of stopping someone to feel what he wants to feel. Second is direct influence. This includes suggestions and giving advice to the client because at that moment he needs it badly. Well, we always have to remember that, especially in our community, the client will not come to us unless it is their last resort. Next is catharsis or ventilation. When a client opens up to you, please listen. Just listen because it matters to them. And the way you let them release their pent up feelings, their emotions, it is already an intervention on the part of the social work helping process, or as far as the social work is concerned. Another thing is reflective consideration of the current person situation configuration. We have to let our clients understand that what is happening and the present condition is what it is. We have to let them understand that it is bound to happen, and if it is not based on their ideal situation, then it happens for a reason. Letting them understand that the present condition happens and what they can do as individual is to have a better present functioning as an individual in order for them to address the problem. Next is encouragement of client to reflect on the dynamics of his response patterns or tendencies. It means helping him to think about behavior causes, that maybe what is happening to him is out of his response to the situation. Because sometimes things happen because of how we respond to it. And lastly, encouragement of client to think about the development of response patterns or tendencies. It means that as social workers, we need to help the client understand the contribution of the past or current functioning, that the past activities by the client or past behavior by the client affects the present condition or present situation. Our main task as a social worker is to let our client understand that whatever is happening in their situation is a byproduct of his interpersonal relationship with his immediate environment and the society or the system where he or she is directly involved. So that's it for the psychosocial approach. For more models and approaches, see you in the next video.